right, hello everybody. Welcome back to Ron's Personal Fitness. Today we're going to talk about, that's right, twice this week. How's everybody doing? We are going to talk about compound versus isolation exercise today. Now, those terms are pretty easily defined, but not necessarily easily understood when it comes to exercise. For definition's sake, a compound exercise is an exercise that utilizes more than one of the joints of the body. For example, in a bench press, when we're lying down with a barbell, I am going to be pushing the bar away from my chest, which will activate the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. When I squat, as I squat down, I activate the hip joints and the knee joints, and even the ankles to some extent. So those are compound exercises, or what we like to think of as compound exercises, as opposed to an isolation exercise. So if I pin my elbows to my side and I merely curl the way activating my bicep and the elbow joint only, that is more of an isolation for the bicep muscle. However, it's not quite that simple. You see, some people are stuck in the 60s and they believe that in order to build muscle, which I don't care if you're an 80-year-old woman going to the gym for fitness purposes and you're trying to build strength so you don't fall and develop osteoporosis, you're trying to reverse osteoporosis and those types of things with weight-bearing exercise, you are still trying to build muscle. You're not going to build muscle to the point of Mr. Olympia or anything like that, I promise you. But women who feel, I don't want to get all muscular and look masculine, most of the time the most masculine of athletes they look that way because they take male hormones, to be perfectly honest with you. So when you take male hormones, you start to look like a man, and when you don't, you don't. So, in a nutshell. So, the exercises that we want to perform in the gym, whether you're, like I said, an 80-year-old woman or a 20-year-old teenage guy, or just out of being a teenage guy who wants to develop as much muscle on his frame as possible, the exercises are all the same. The concepts are all the same. The intensity is different, but the movements really don't change from one extreme to the other. I have a 94-year-old female client who does the exact same exercises as, a 36-year-old male client that I have. They don't do them the same way. We're not looking for the same end result, but the movement itself, the proper form of the movement doesn't change. Okay? Now, when we're dealing with the mindset in the gym, we want to talk about the mind-muscle connection. Now, the mind-muscle connection is just that. As I'm lifting a weight, I want to have full concentration and put my mind into the muscle that I am attempting to stimulate. All right? As the great Lee Haney, Mr. Olympia, once said, stimulate, don't annihilate. And I've got a couple other analogies along those lines. So I want to stimulate muscle growth by placing a resistance and a stress on that muscle that will cause the body to say, you know what, we need to be a little bit stronger, and I'm going to make those muscles a little stronger so that we can handle this kind of resistance load. Okay? So when we're exercising, it doesn't matter what the movement is, we need to concentrate and try to feel the proper muscle working. And that's where a trainer could come in handy to you to help you, isolate what you're supposed to be feeling. But it could be with a compound movement, is my point. You could be doing a squat, for example, and unless your intention is to lift as much weight as humanly possible, you should be attempting to feel the quads, the quadriceps of the upper legs, the hamstrings, the glutes, and so on, as you're moving through that range of motion to stimulate those muscles. Otherwise, you're really not going to get as much out of it. Now, where the thinking of the 60s comes in is that you must do bench press, you must do deadlifts, you must do squats. the three major powerlifting movements, as it turns out, and we'll explain why that is. You must do overhead shoulder presses or military press. You must do bent over rows, and you must do all of these as heavy as humanly possible if you have any hopes of building muscle. That's not true. It just isn't true. Okay? You can build a great chest and have great chest and shoulder development having never done a bench press, a flat bench press. In fact, I would bet that the people who isolate their chest differently probably have better development of the chest muscles, the pectoralis muscles, than their counterpart who only does bench press. Because the chest is not being maximally stimulated during a bench press. The front of the shoulders sure are, and the triceps are getting their load at the top, kinda, but locking out the weight isometrically, which is never as good as full range of motion work. Isometric is holding a resistance against movement. So if it's a heavy weight and I'm trying to hold that against gravity, that's isometric if no movement is taking place. If I'm holding a weight against gravity, squeezing, that's isometric. And in most cases, we're not actually stimulating as much of the muscle as we think we are. It feels like we are, but we're not, because the load is not appropriate to gravity and things like that. And, you're just like, where are you getting all this from? Well, 41 years of experience plus Mr. Doug Brignole has taken the time to put it all in a book of the physics of resistance exercise. That link is down or in the comments here, okay? So if you're wondering, is a barbell squat with the weight on my back a better movement than thigh extensions for my quadriceps, you'll probably find out they aren't. And the book will tell you why. And I'm going to get into that in a couple of weeks when we talk about biomechanics and kinesiology and some of the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of movement and how the body works, and some of those principles that are mentioned in the book here, but are also paramount in understanding biomechanics of the human body. Okay? So we'll get a little more complicated in a couple weeks. But right now, know that those three major lifts that we talked about, and even the overhead press, which is a jerk movement, if you snap it up in Olympic lifting, those things are pretty much derived from the circus, okay? From the sideshow acts of long ago, where people would come and pay money to see the strong man do his act. And his act would be lifting ridiculous amounts of weights in these types of movements, or ridiculous compared to what the average person could lift anyway. So people would see that, and eventually people decided that that's how he got so strong. Well, truth be told, if you want to be a better piano player, you play the piano more. So if you want to lift more weights in that movement, you practice that movement, developing that movement over and over. If you change the movement up, you'll find that some of those incredibly strong guys at a bench press, for example, can't curl a lot of weight. In fact, it's surprising how little they can curl, because the biceps really aren't involved very much in their bench pressing. So that's just one example. So, you have a situation where the movement, the appearance of the movement is, wow, that must be working a bunch of muscles. And the truth is, it may be working a multitude of muscles, but at a percentage of what each muscle could be performing had it been isolated. So our compound movements may or may not, usually are not, the best way to stimulate the muscles. And one reason that I haven't had a client do a flat bench press in years with a barbell is primarily injury prevention. You kind of put your body at a bad position. We also, if we're going to do any type of pressing overhead, it's with the weight in front of us in a machine, where the machine is controlling the weight a little more forward than back. We try not to go behind the neck, unless my people have really, really good shoulder mobility. But even then, when are you ever going to pick something up and put it behind you on a shelf? You're just not going to do that. That's not a normal movement. So it sets us up for impingements of the muscles, the inferent supraspinatus muscles of the shoulder become impinged. And when that happens, you end up with a shoulder injury when there were much better exercises to isolate those deltoid muscles in the first place. Okay. Now, some machines have been engineered to be a little bit more protective in their range of motion, and for that, I do have my people utilize those because I still want them to be able to reach over their head. I don't want them walking around with the inability to put something over their head, for example. So injury prevention is a really good reason to start utilizing isolation exercises. Chances are that a lighter load, as far as the weight you pick up, okay, think about this for a second. If I can do an exercise with a 20-pound dumbbell that imparts hundreds of pounds of force on my shoulder muscle in a lateral movement, for example, that is better than a movement where I have to use hundreds of pounds to impart a few dozen pounds of force on my shoulder, because it's an ineffective, inefficient exercise. And all I'm doing is putting unnecessary load on the joints, as well as maybe spinal compression and things like that, neck compression, which I do not want to have happen. A lot of people who've had neck injuries, their doctors, their surgeons will immediately say no more overhead pressing. Well, that's because they don't want you doing heavy overhead pressing. But I promise you still need to be able to move your arms over your head, otherwise you'll quickly lose that ability. So it's not that you shouldn't be putting your hand over your head, it's that you shouldn't be putting a heavy load, compressing the cervical and thoracic spine and creating more of an issue on your neck. Okay? Which brings us to one of my other sayings, which is train, don't strain. All right? We're going into the gym to build muscle, not to hurt ourselves. And the minute an exercise becomes a feat of strength, it is no longer an exercise. So we have to utilize a weight that allows us to do the proper rep range. If you'll go back on our YouTube channel and view some of our other videos, you'll see where I talk about rep range and how to set up your routine. But for upper body, it's going to be about 12 repetitions and lower body about 15. So if I pick up a weight that at the end of 12 reps, I feel like I've worked my muscle, the proper muscle, but I could do a couple more if my life depended on it, that weight is good. If I'm failing miserably at that rep, the weight's too heavy. And of course, if I can't get to that rep, it's way too heavy. So by the way, if I could do another 50, it's way too light. So I want to have a few in reserve. I don't want to have dozens in reserve. Okay? So I'm going to pick a weight that allows me to train the muscle, not strain the muscle. And the muscles themselves have no idea, other than what resistance is being imparted upon them, where it's coming from. It doesn't know if it's a barbell. It doesn't know if it's a dumbbell. It doesn't know if it's a machine, a cable. It doesn't know. It just knows that in order to move your limb in the way that you're trying to move it, it needs to contract or shorten, muscle A to facilitate that. Okay, and muscle B will help a little bit, and muscle C will help a little less than that. So this is not a great exercise for muscle C, but it is a great exercise for muscle A. That's my point here, okay? So I am picking the right exercise. My next exercise will emphasize muscle B, and my third exercise will emphasize muscle C. Say, giving muscle A a break. So when you're doing these things, we want to not trick the muscles. That's not really what we're doing. We're just letting them do their thing, and we're doing it in the safest way possible. But the muscle itself has no idea where it's coming from. It knows it is a resistance, it is a stress. Okay? And Another way of thinking of it is exert yourself in the gym. Don't hurt yourself in the gym. All right, exert, don't hurt. All of those things will allow you to remain consistent in your exercise and give you some longevity at it. I mean, let's be honest, I'm 53. I have been safely lifting weights since I was 12 years old under the tutelage of my father, who is an expert at this as well. So if you're given the right instruction and the right motivation along the way, you can continue to do this for a lifetime and keep the muscle that you've built along the way. If you're in your 60s and you're just starting, congratulations. It's never too late to start. They have very good success with 90-year-olds in nursing homes, getting them on a light resistance training program, primarily using isolation for certain muscle groups, so that they are now more mobile. They're able to ambulate, get up and walk around. They're having good success with becoming less and less bedridden throughout the day, or less sedentary completely throughout the day. And that's starting someone in their 90s who may or may not have ever exercised a day in their life before. All right, so today is a good day to get started if you haven't already. We're about 9 weeks away to the end of the year. So in these next 9 weeks, you could make some great progress. All right, if you want some more information, specifically on the physics of these movements and how to do the mathematical calculations, and I'll just give you an example here. If you want the specifics, I can give those to you. But a 200-pound man with weight on his back, okay, and we're talking about on a barbell in a squat position with the weight across his shoulders, all right, with another 200 pounds on his back, imparts about 1,200 pounds of force on the quadriceps, okay? Excuse me, I'm sorry, 900 pounds of force on the quadriceps. In a different squat movement called a sissy squat, where you put no weight on your back whatsoever, you can impart 1,200 pounds of force on the same quadriceps. So you go from 900 pounds having to trudge around with 200 pounds on your back to nothing more than body weight, and you've increased the resistance on the muscles by over 300 pounds. So, and again, we can get, I'm just giving you a generalization there, okay? But it has to do with the way the force is applied. And again, those leg muscles have no idea the difference, other than they're working a lot harder in that second exercise. And it's safer for you. So don't go into the gym and hurt yourself. Don't think that you have to be a strong man participating in some of these ridiculous programs that I see out there. If you haven't learned the proper techniques for some of these lifts, you can be very badly injured permanently. You can have permanent joint and muscle injuries that they're yours forever now. You earned them. So make sure that you're going into the gym, and it doesn't mean that an isolation exercise is easier. It just means that it's more specific to targeting the muscle in which you're working. It doesn't mean that you're taking the easy road. It doesn't mean that you're a lesser exerciser for doing that. All right, the ego that needs to be left at the door is not left at the door often enough at the gym. And people will say, yeah, but I can bench press 400 pounds. Well, that's great. But I promise you, if you do it correctly, 50-pound dumbbells will feel as heavy as 400 pounds will, if you do them right. Okay? So that's what we're talking about, is injury prevention, not being talked into doing compound exercises because they're supposed to be better. They're not better unless you're trying to get better at lifting those compound movements. If you're a power lifter, absolutely, they're essential to what you do. If you're a bodybuilder, no. If you're a fitness enthusiast, no. If you're just trying to keep out of the hospital or out of the doctor's office, definitely not. All right, so there's your difference between compound and isolation exercises, and a little bit of information imparted on that. as we go through the next couple weeks. The day that I do this live, notice we did Tuesday and Thursday today. Next week will probably be Wednesday when we can go live. But I'll leave these up and let you peruse them at your leisure. If you go to our YouTube channel, they're all archived over there. So now's a good time if you head over to YouTube to go, or if you're watching this on YouTube, to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a thing. Leave a comment and ring that bell so you'll know the next time that we do this. And until next time, I hope you and your family are safe and happy. I'm Ron from Ron's Personal Fitness. Bye, everybody.